The first snow of winter fell on Crestmore Lake like ash, dissolving into the dark water without a trace. From my cabin window, I watched it disappear, here and then gone, much like the summer residents who abandoned their lakeside properties after Labor Day, leaving only 5 of us to witness the gradual entombment of our small peninsula beneath the winter's shroud. I was still relatively new to Crestmore, having purchased the property only 18 months ago, a place to write, to recover after the divorce. The locals still called it the old Marston place, as if my name, Daniel Thorne, was merely a temporary designation, something that would fade with the seasons. Perhaps they were right. The cabin had called to me from the moment I saw the listing, a modest structure of weathered cedar and stone with a history I could feel in its bones. Built in 1922 by a logging foreman named Marston, who, according to local legend, had disappeared during a winter storm, leaving behind only footprints that led to the lake's edge before vanishing entirely. 3 more owners had come and gone since then, each one staying less than 5 years, each leaving under circumstances that the real estate agent had described as personal reasons, with a smile that didn't quite make sense. I should have recognized the pattern, should have wondered why a lakefront property with a writer's studio and a stone fireplace had been so surprisingly affordable. But grief can be a peculiar form of blindness. After Catherine left, taking with her 15 years of memories and leaving behind only the silence of a half-empty home, I had seized upon the cabin as salvation, a place where I could resurrect my stalled writing career and perhaps, in the process, rediscover some fraction of myself that had been lost in the slow erosion of my marriage. My second novel had been circling the drain for years, a psychological thriller about a journalist who becomes obsessed with a cold case involving a missing family. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd been a crime reporter before turning to fiction, that I'd built a career on documenting the quiet horrors that humans inflict upon one another. Yet nothing I'd witnessed in all those years had prepared me for the peculiar emptiness that follows the dissolution of a marriage, the way familiar spaces become suddenly alien, how silence acquires texture and weight. The locals had received me with a polite remoteness that I mistook for the natural wariness of a small community towards outsiders. Ellis, with his precise speech and academic demeanor, Margot, whose watchful eyes always seemed to be cataloging my responses, the weavers across the lake whose outdoor gatherings fell silent whenever I passed by in my kayak. Only now do I understand their caution for what it truly was: assessment, evaluation, selection. The knocking began after midnight, a gentle tapping that might have been mistaken for pine branches against the siding. Had the wind been blowing? It wasn't. The air hung motionless, heavy with cold and the scent of wood smoke from my dying fire. 3 distinct knocks, and then silence. Then 3 more, a pattern that felt deliberate, almost conversational. Earlier that evening, I had been working on my manuscript, the words finally flowing after months of stagnation. There was something about the lake in winter, its vast, frozen silence, that had unlocked something within me. My protagonist had just discovered a hidden room in the missing family's home, a space absent from blueprints, accessible only through a concealed panel behind a bookcase. The scene had come to me in a dream 3 nights prior, a dream in which I'd been searching my own cabin's walls, running my fingers along the knotted pine panels, certain there was something behind them, something breathing. I had fallen asleep at my desk, the laptop's screen gone dark, when the knocking pulled me from uneasy dreams of dark water and waiting hands. My neck ached as I straightened. The cabin's interior now lit only by the dying embers in the fireplace. The digital clock on the stove read 12:17. No one visited Crestmore Lake after midnight in February. I drew back the curtain, expecting to see Ellis or perhaps Margot, the only neighbors close enough to visit without a car. Instead, I found a young woman standing barefoot in the snow, wearing only a thin sundress, her dark hair clinging to her face in wet strands. Steam rose from her skin as if she had just emerged from the lake that lay frozen and silent behind her. Her eyes met mine through the glass, wide and disoriented, her lips moving in words I couldn't hear. I hesitated only a moment before opening the door. Something tugged at the edges of my memory. A local news story from months ago about a woman who had disappeared during a winter hike. Her car found abandoned at the trailhead 10 miles north. Had she somehow survived, wandering here in a state of hypothermic confusion? "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling like the last autumn leaf clinging to its branch. "Please help me. I don't know where I am." I ushered her inside, away from the frigid air that seemed to follow her like a jealous lover. The moment she crossed the threshold, the fire in the hearth dimmed as if responding to her presence. A thin rivulet of water traced its way across my floor, following in her wake. The air around her seemed to distort slightly, like heat rising from summer pavement, though she emanated a cold that reached me from several feet away. Up close, I realized she wasn't as young as I had first thought, perhaps in her early 30s, with fine lines at the corners of her eyes that spoke of laughter in better times. There was something vaguely familiar about her features, a resemblance to someone I might have seen in town, or perhaps in the local historical society's pamphlet that previous owners had left in the cabin's small bookcase. "I'm Eliza," she said, accepting the blanket I offered, but making no move to wrap it around her shivering shoulders. Her sundress clung to her body, a pale yellow fabric patterned with small blue flowers that seemed to shift and move in the dim light, as if the blossoms were floating just beneath the surface of a pond. "Eliza Crestmore." The name strummed a chord of recognition. I had seen it before, carved into the memorial bench that overlooked the lake's northern shore, in memory of the Crestmore family, guardians of the lake, lost to its waters August 12, 1973. I had sat there often during my first summer, watching the sunset while nursing a glass of whiskey, wondering what it would be like to be lost to the waters, whether it would feel like a surrender, a return to some primordial state of grace. The name sent an involuntary chill through me. Crestmore? Like the lake? She nodded, droplets falling from her hair onto my hardwood floor. "My family's lake. Our summer home is just around the bend. The big white Victorian with the wraparound porch." Her words came faster now, urgent. "Can you take me there? Mother will be worried. We were supposed to leave for the city yesterday. but I wanted one last swim. The water was so warm, like bath water. But then the fog rolled in, and I couldn't find the shore. I frowned. Miss Crestmore, Eliza, it's February. The lake's been frozen for months. I gestured toward the window where snow continued to fall in silent benediction, and there's no Victorian on this lake, just cabins like mine and Ellis's A-frame and the Weaver place across the water. Eliza's face contorted, not in confusion, but in a flash of something darker. Anger, perhaps? Or fear masquerading as indignation? Don't be ridiculous. It's August 12th, 1973, and our house has been here since my great-grandfather built it in 1892. The specificity of the date sent a tendril of unease curling through my stomach. I'd researched the area before buying my cabin, fascinated by its history. The name Crestmore was familiar. The lake's namesake had been a logging baron who'd built a grand house on this very peninsula. But that house and the entire Crestmore family had vanished in 1973, when a sudden storm capsized their boats as they were leaving for the season. All 5 members of the family had drowned. Their bodies were never recovered. August 12, 1973? I stepped back, putting distance between us. I think I should call someone, the sheriff, or maybe Dr. Weaver. You must be confused, maybe suffering from hypothermia, or... I trailed off, unwilling to suggest what suddenly seemed most likely, that this woman was experiencing some kind of psychotic break. Call? Eliza repeated, as if the word was foreign to her. Her gaze drifted to my cell phone on the counter, and something like recognition flickered across her face. Oh, yes, call, but not the sheriff. Call my father, James Crestmore. He'll come and get me. I nodded, though I had no intention of pretending to call a man who had been dead for nearly 50 years. Why don't you sit by the fire while I make that call? You must be freezing. She moved toward the fireplace with a fluidity that seemed at odds with her apparent disorientation, sinking into the hearth with practiced grace. The dying embers cast a copper glow across her features, illuminating a face that was beautiful in a haunting, old-fashioned way. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes that seemed to reflect more light than they received. I retreated to the kitchen, dialing Ellis's number with trembling fingers. My nearest neighbor was a retired psychiatrist, a man whose quiet competence had been a balm during my darkest days after moving here. He had a way of listening that made the silence between words feel capacious rather than empty, a professional habit, perhaps, but one I had come to rely on during our occasional chess matches and shared dinners. Ellis had been the first to welcome me to Crestmore Lake, appearing at my door the day after I moved in with a bottle of single malt and a worn copy of Thoreau's Walden. "Essential reading for a man seeking solitude," he had said, his smile revealing teeth too perfect to be original equipment for a man in his 60s. We had fallen into an easy friendship, though there were moments when I'd catch him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, a speculative assessment that reminded me of my father's gaze when examining antiques, calculating value and potential. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice thick with sleep yet oddly alert, as if he had been waiting for my call. "Daniel? What's wrong?" I kept my voice low, glancing back to ensure Eliza couldn't hear. "There's a woman here. She appeared at my door, soaking wet." barefoot in the snow. She's saying strange things, that it's 1973, and that her name is Eliza Crestmore. A long silence followed, punctuated only by Ellis's measured breathing. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its drowsiness, replaced by a timbre I'd never heard before, deeper, more resonant, infused with a formality that seemed out of character. "Don't let her leave. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Before I could respond, before I could ask any of the questions crowding my throat, he added something that turned my blood to slush. "The covenant abides, Daniel. The hollow season has found its vessel." The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone. The kitchen suddenly feeling colder than it had moments before. Through the window above the sink, I noticed that the snow had stopped falling, replaced by a thick fog that now pressed against the glass like a living thing seeking entry. Within it, shadows moved in a way that defied the stillness of the night. When I returned to the living room, Eliza was standing at my desk, leafing through the manuscript I'd been working on, a historical novel set in the logging camps of 19th century Minnesota. She looked up, unapologetic. "You're a writer," she said, not a question, but an observation. "My mother writes too, poetry mostly. She says creative minds are more sensitive to the places where time wears thin." She smiled, a small, secret expression. "Like here, Crestmore Lake. There are places where the now and then bleed into each other, especially near the water." I felt a prickling sensation at the base of my skull, a warning signal I'd learned to heed in my years as a crime reporter, before turning to fiction. It was the same feeling I'd experienced at crime scenes, where the explanation didn't quite fit the evidence, where witnesses avoided eye contact when recounting their stories. The feeling had saved my life once in Chicago when an interview with a supposed grieving husband had triggered the same internal alarm, prompting me to leave his home minutes before police arrived to arrest him for his wife's murder. My instincts had been dormant since moving to Crestmore, until now. They screamed at me to get this woman out of my home, to lock the doors, to flee into the night despite the cold. But where would I go? The nearest town was 30 minutes away by car, and the road would be treacherous this weather. I called my neighbor, I said, ignoring her unsettling comments. "He's a doctor. He's coming to help." "Is he?" Her glaze drifted to the window, where the snow was now falling more heavily, obscuring the world beyond my cabin. "I don't think anyone's coming tonight, Daniel. The hollow season is upon us, and no one crosses the threshold unscathed." The way she said my name with familiar intimacy, as if she'd known me for years, sent another chill through me. I hadn't told her my name, nor had I mentioned the phrase that had haunted my dreams since arriving at Crestmore Lake. Hollow season. I dismissed it as a fragment of my subconscious, perhaps something overheard in town and forgotten. Now it emerged from this stranger's lips with the weight of ritual, of invocation. "How do you know my name?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. My fingers sought the reassurance of my phone in my pocket, wondering if I should call someone else, the sheriff perhaps, though the department was small and understaffed, unlikely to brave the worsening weather for what they would dismiss as a mental health issue. Eliza tilted her head, water droplets falling from her hair onto the manuscript pages. Where they landed, the ink began to run, words dissolving into shapeless stains. "The lake knows all who dwell upon its shores," she said, "and I am of the lake." "How do you know who I am?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I'd intended. Eliza turned away from the window, and in the dim light, her sundress appeared darker, as if the fabric itself was absorbing the shadows. "I know all the souls who dwell on Crestmore shores. The lake keeps no secrets from its namesake." Her voice had changed, becoming somehow older, resonant with an authority that felt misplaced in one so young. "But you've been blind to us, haven't you? All of you modern dwellers, with your electric lights and your constant noise, drowning out the whispers of those who came before." The knocking came again, 3 sharp raps that made both of us turn toward the door. Relief flooded through me. Ellis had arrived faster than expected. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Ellis who stood on my porch. It was a tall man in a dark suit, his silver hair slicked back, his face handsome in a severe patrician way. Behind him stood a woman in an elegant green dress, her hair styled in a bouffant that hadn't been fashionable for decades. Beside her were 2 younger women, perhaps in their 20s, dressed in similar anachronistic finery. All 4 were dripping wet, water pooling around their leather shoes on my porch. "Eliza," the man said, his voice carrying the cultured tones of old money. "It's time to come home. Mother's been worried." Eliza moved to my side, her body radiating a cold that seemed to seep into my bones where our arms touched. "Father," she acknowledged with a nod, "I got lost in the fog. This kind man was helping me." James Crestmore, for it could be no one else, extended his hand to me, water dripping from his fingertips. "We're grateful for your assistance, Mr. Thorne, but we really must be going. We have a long journey ahead." I stared at his hand, unable to move. Water dripped from his extended fingers, not in droplets, but in thin, continuous rivulets that pooled on my porch without diminishing the moisture that saturated his sleeve. Behind him, through the curtain of snow, I could just make out the silhouette of what appeared to be a large Victorian house where I knew only ancient pines should stand. Lights glowed in its many windows, and on the path leading to its wraparound porch stood more figures, dozens of them, all in period clothing, all watching my cabin with patient, hungry eyes. The structure was impossible, yet undeniably present. 3 stories of ornate gingerbread trim and stained glass, a widow's walk crowning its slate roof. I recognized it suddenly from a faded photograph in the Crestmore Historical Society labeled simply Crestmore Estates 1899 to 1973. The house had burned to the ground the same night the family drowned, a coincidence that locals attributed to lightning from the storm that had capsized their boat. Nothing had been rebuilt on that site. The land had been incorporated into the state forest that bordered the lake. Yet, there it stood, illuminated from within, solid and substantial as the trees that should have occupied the space it now claimed. "You're not real," I whispered, taking an involuntary step backwards. "The Crestmores drowned in 1973. There's a memorial plaque in the town square." A sad smile crossed James Crestmore's face, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous and too closely set within his mouth. "Deaths are often exaggerated, Mr. Thorne, or perhaps misattributed. His gaze shifted to something behind me. "Isn't that right, Dr. Ellis?" My mind flashed to the 5 graves in Crestmore Cemetery. The simple headstones I had passed on my morning runs: James, Helen, Eliza, Margaret, and Emma Crestmore, beloved family, lost to the waters August 12, 1973. But there had been something odd about those graves, something I had noticed but not consciously registered until this moment. The grass grew differently there, luster despite the winter dormancy elsewhere in the cemetery, and sometimes after rain, the ground around the headstones glistened wetly as if saturated from below rather than above. I turned to find Ellis standing in my kitchen doorway, though I hadn't heard him enter. He was dressed not in the flannel and jeans I'd come to expect, but in a tweed suit with a pocket watch chain glinting in the firelight. The suit was old-fashioned, and its cut reminiscent of photographs from the early 20th century. It fit him perfectly, as if tailored to his form, yet the fabric had a sheen of dampness that caught the light strangely. I suddenly recalled all the times Ellis had steered our conversations away from his past, deflecting questions about where he had practiced psychiatry before retirement, changing the subject when I'd asked how long he had lived at Crestmore Lake. "Time moves differently here," he'd said once when I pressed him on the topic. "The years have a way of blurring into one another like ripples spreading across still water." Now he stood before me, familiar yet transformed. His silver hair slicked back from a face that seemed somehow younger than it had appeared just hours ago. The lines around his eyes had softened, and his posture held a vigor that belied his apparent age. "I tried to warn you, Daniel," Ellis said, his familiar voice now tinged with an accent I couldn't place, something old world, European perhaps, with formal cadences that reminded me of my Czech grandmother. "The lake claims one each hollow season. It's been our way since 1892, when the first Crestmore made his covenant with the waters." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, panic rising in my throat. "What covenant?" My mind raced through fragments of local history that now assembled into a darker pattern. The logging operation that had dammed part of the lake in the 1890s, causing unprecedented flooding. The subsequent miraculous recovery of the watershed under Crestmore's management. The family's curiously enduring wealth despite the decline of the logging industry. The locals reluctant to swim in the lake despite its pristine appearance. The annual remembrance ceremony held each February, where residents gathered at the shore to cast flowers onto the ice. I had attended such a ceremony just 2 weeks prior, standing awkwardly at the periphery while Margot led the proceedings, her voice carrying across the frozen expanse as she recited what I had assumed was a poem. "What sleeps beneath the ice must wake. What wakes must feed. What feeds must return. The hollow season demands its due." Eliza's cold fingers found mine, interlacing our hands in a grip that was surprisingly strong. "One soul to sustain the family," she explained, her voice almost gentle. "One soul to keep the waters at bay for another year. The lake gives, and the lake takes away." Through the window, I could see Margot and the weavers now joining the crowd outside. All in period dress, all watching with the same patient hunger as the rest, my neighbors, my friends, all part of whatever madness this was. "It's your turn, Daniel," Ellis said, his tone apologetic. "It could have been any of the summer residents, but they all left. Only you stayed for the hollow season." Understanding washed over me like the icy waters of Crestmore Lake, the lake's mysterious draw that had compelled me to purchase the cabin despite its remote location. The strange dreams I'd been having since moving here, of drowning, of being pulled beneath dark waters by hands both gentle and insistent. The way the locals watched me as if waiting for something. They had been waiting for this moment, for me. "I don't understand," I said, though the terrible truth was crystallizing in my mind. "What happens now?" James Crestmore smiled a predator's smile. "Now, Mr. Thorne, you join us for the crossing, the journey from shore to shore, and someone else will buy your lovely cabin, drawn by the lake's call, unaware of its price." Outside, the crowd began to move toward my cabin in unison, their wet footsteps leaving no impression on the snow. Eliza's grip on my hand tightened, pulling me gently but inexorably toward the door. "Don't fight it, Daniel," she whispered, her breath cold against my ear. "The waters are warm and the time flows differently beneath the surface. You'll hardly notice the passing of the years." I tried to pull away, but my limbs felt heavy, my thoughts sluggish, as if I were already sinking beneath the lake's surface. Through the open door, I could see that the snow had stopped falling, replaced by a thick fog that obscured everything beyond my porch. Within that fog, shapes moved, rippling, fluid forms that were neither fully human nor fully water. Ellis placed a hand on my shoulder, guiding me forward. "Every family needs new blood, Daniel. The Crestmores have chosen you. It's an honor, really." As I stepped onto the porch, my feet splashed into water that should have been frozen snow. The cold shocked me back to clarity just for a moment, long enough to see headlights cutting through the fog on the road leading to my cabin. A car, I recognized. Margot's teenage son returning from a late shift at the town's only diner. A potential witness, a possible salvation. I opened my mouth to scream, but Eliza's hand covered my lips, her skin now slick and cold as the lake itself. "Hush now," she murmured. "The covenant demands silence. The hollow season tolerates no interference." The headlights swerved suddenly, violently, as if the driver had lost control. There was a distant crashing sound, followed by silence. "No," I gasped against her palm. "You can't." "We didn't," James Crestmore said quietly. "The lake protects its own. The boy simply encountered some fog, a tragic accident that will remind the town of the dangers of Crestmore's shores." The crowd had encircled us now, their wet clothes clinging to bodies that seemed to ripple and shift in the fog. Beyond them, the Victorian house loomed larger than should have been possible, its windows blazing with golden light that cast no warmth. "Come, Daniel," Eliza said, releasing my mouth to take her hand once more. "Mother has prepared a room for you. You'll be comfortable with us in time." As if in a dream, I found myself walking down the path toward the house that should not exist, surrounded by people who had died decades before I was born. With each step, the water rose higher around my ankles, my knees, my waist, yet I felt no panic, only a strange, resigned acceptance. Behind me, my cabin lights winked out one by one until only darkness remained. Ahead, the Victorian's windows beckoned with their golden promise of belonging. The last thing I saw before the waters closed over my head was Ellis standing on the shore, already fading into the fog, raising his hand in a gesture that might have been farewell or might have been blessing. The hollow season has claimed its due. And somewhere, a real estate agent was preparing to list a charming lakeside cabin recently vacated, perfect for someone seeking solitude and inspiration on the historic shores of Lake Crestmore. Thanks for listening to my Dark Veil tale. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. It really does help me grow this channel so I can make more content for your enjoyment. Also, check out the linked video for another creeper-style story from Dark Veil Tales.